It seems that the powers that be, or shouldn't be, have a growing hatred for any alternative methods of being healthy, of trying to correct this rampant obesity in the culture. They don't want to accept the responsibility, at least in part, for the obesity problem lies in the food system itself, the grotesque frankenfoods that dominate the American plate. This has been a problem if you've studied at all the history of food and the food system in the United States, going back to the late 19th century and early 20th century, when key food items began to appear on the landscape that became omnipresent, and with them a slow rise in heart disease and a slow rise in obesity, until other factors in the food system emerged that then sped up the process. These key foods were things like vegetable oils and seed oils. When they began to replace animal fats, you started getting some health problems emerging, in small amounts at first, but they grew over time as those ingredients became more and more present in the culture. Add in the rise of ultra-processed foods in the 20th century, and then fast and convenient foods in the second half of the 20th century, and you created a perfect storm where suddenly obesity became a noticeable problem beginning in the 1970s. I don't need to give you a lecture on the history of the food crisis. We generally understand it, that it is unnatural foods, ultra-processed foods, and things that human beings couldn't possibly have been eating in previous ages in more than tiny trace amounts, suddenly becoming massive drivers of the total calories consumed by people today. So, as a consequence of this, thoughtful people have looked to alternatives, taking very radical approaches to correcting these problems. That's why you're on a carnivore channel watching this video. You're either curious about the carnivore diet, or you keep a ketogenic diet or a carnivore diet yourself. You've taken radical steps, or are interested in taking radical steps to improve your own health. And you've become pretty suspicious, by extension, of what food and health authorities have said on nutrition and on the subject, because their solution of just tracking calories in, calories out, and eating complex carbohydrates and less meat seems to have, at the very least, done the opposite of what it should do, if not even worse than that. Exacerbated problems beyond anything we could have imagined before. And they keep doubling and tripling down on this because the processes for studying these things in a neutral way don't even exist anymore. The entire food system has been taken over and corrupted by those who have a vested interest in keeping you eating Crisco or keeping you eating breakfast cereal. As I talked about in a video recently, there is a cereal magnate in this country who thinks that in an economic downturn that poor families dealing with inflation should eat cereal for breakfast because it's cheap and, quote, nutritious. The consequences of that cereal aren't cheap, and the claims to their being nutritious are at best dubious and highly debatable. But these radical approaches we have taken to deal with these consequences in our own lives have led to some inventive solutions, including what we generally call intermittent fasting or time-restricted eating. For those who don't know what that is, it's simply having a handful of hours a day where you can eat, and then the rest of the time you don't. Most people who are beginners to intermittent fasting have their not eating time for 16 hours a day and their eating availability for 8 hours a day, and that's the beginner level. More advanced intermittent fasters will go for a 4-hour or a 2-hour or a 1-hour eating window and not eating for the rest of the time, every single day. And sometimes just for funsies, they throw in a 24 or 48-hour or a 72-hour window of not eating at all. A 0-hour eating window. A lot of people have had enormous success with this. Their metabolisms improve. They start burning stored fat. It's a wonderful thing. And it costs you nothing financially to do this. In fact, you may end up spending less money on food. You're certainly going to spend less money on processed foods. And there are people out there who find great success with intermittent fasting while still eating fast food and while still eating ultra-processed foods. The only thing they changed was how often they eat each day. And that was it. They reduced it to a 4-hour window or a 1-hour window or whatever it is they do, and they have had enormous success. There are social media groups for intermittent fasting where people flat out say they're not doing even keto, that they had, when they're breaking their fast, they're going to Pizza Hut and getting a pizza. And I found enormous success even doing that. I'm not endorsing that approach by any stretch. I'm just telling you that that intermittent fasting seems to work, at least for some people, which is why it's gotten the attention of those who don't want you to do it. So we get this very dubious, suspicious article from sciencealert.com. This headline: time-restricted eating may increase risk of early death, study warns. Risk of early death. So everything in life comes with risks. Every single thing does. Putting food in your mouth comes with a risk of early death. It does. It's called a choking hazard. But that's not what they're saying here. They are trying to tell you that the way that our ancestors were is dangerous. Breakfast as we understand it is kind of a modern conception. It really is. A lot of other cultures, their idea of breakfast is a tiny little thing they might eat to take the edge off of some coffee. And then they don't have a real meal until midday. A lot of people didn't eat much in the morning at all. Our concept of breakfast is very relatively modern. But this alert, they're invoking the experts to tell you not to engage in time-restricted eating of any kind, that it could cause diabetes and other sorts of scare words. Here's what they say in their own words from the article, quote, intermittent fasting is being touted for a range of short-term benefits revealed in recent studies, but we don't know much about its long-term effects. A new study has found some concerning links that may outweigh the benefits of intermittent fasting in the long run. One form of this popular dietary intervention, known as time-restricted eating, has dieters restricting their food intake to within a window of just 8 hours or less in a day, and fasting for the remaining 16 hours or more. While some people undertake this extreme form of dieting under medical supervision to address specific health issues, many are taking it upon themselves as a way to fast-track weight loss without medical advice. Perhaps not surprising with celebrities like Jennifer Aniston, Hugh Jackman, Halle Berry, Chris Hemsworth, and Kourtney Kardashian promoting the practice as a way of controlling physique. While weight is one aspect of a healthy body, the new research by a team in China suggests that TRE is time-restricted eating is linked to some serious and concerning long-term effects, including cardiovascular disease and early death. We found that people who followed 8-hour time-restricted eating had higher cardiovascular mortality, both in the general population and in people who have cancer and cardiovascular diseases as a baseline, said the epidemiologist from Zhangjiao University. And while research has found some cardiovascular benefits, Zhang is concerned that most of these studies were conducted over less than a year, missing the bigger picture. Based on what we know so far, focusing on what people eat may be more important than focusing on when they eat, he says. There are many healthy dietary choices that we can use to lower cardiovascular death risk. The observational study was based on data from over 20,000 U.S. adults who participated in the country's National Health and Nutrition Examination survey in 2003 to 2018. We'll just stop there. It's a survey. Nothing really about what they ate in there. Now, the research science says it might be better to restrict what people eat. Go back to what I said earlier. There are people who do intermittent fasting, who break their fast with pizza. On Facebook, there's a guy who shows up in my Instagram Reels sometime over on Facebook who says, here's what I ate for my one meal today. And then he goes to some bizarre place that nobody here would ever think would be a place if you're trying to be healthy he would eat at. Then he just loads up and he seems healthy. The question I have about this is, were the people who in that study passed away from health issues, were they pretty severely far gone with cardiovascular issues and diabetes and other things before they did time-restricted eating? No answer to that question. Were they already diabetic? No answer to that question. The doctor answered the question for you already when he said that it might be better to restrict what you eat. To me, in my mind, time-restricted eating, intermittent fasting, doesn't really make a lot of sense unless you are doing it clean in some way. Preferably with a carb restriction of some kind, either keto or absolute zero carbs or somewhere in between. Otherwise, you're just still putting in your body drivers for negative health outcomes. And until we accept that, a lot of these other dietary methods don't necessarily work all that well. If you were to ask me right now, what should I do? Either time-restricted eating or a ketogenic diet, I would tell you to do keto first and get your body used to that. And then maybe put in some intermittent fasting later to help you break through the whatever problems you're having when you hit that 3-month plateau that a lot of people seem to hit when they do a keto diet. But yeah, are you sold on this? Intermittent fasting is dangerous? I'm not. I intermittent fast still. I do it with a carb-restricted diet. Let me know what you think about this in the comments, please. And hit like and subscribe if you haven't. It certainly helps. So to sharing this on social media, that helps too. I'm Anthony Stine, the Practical Carnivore, and thanks for tuning in.